Chapter 16, Oh One the Last Stance. Chapter 16, Oh One the Last Stance Author's Note. Unedited chapter, come on, Gustav taunted while leaning forward slightly. You want a chance, don't you? A host with real power. Isn't that what you're looking for? Or are you just going to dissolve into nothing? The darkness seemed to tremble, drawn toward him despite itself. Then, with a sudden, desperate lunge, it surged forward, reaching out toward him in a reckless attempt. Gustav didn't flinch. Instead, he opened himself up, allowing the shadowy tendrils to slip through his defenses, to infiltrate his being. The corruption flooded into him with a cold, suffocating sensation spreading through his veins as it tried to take hold. For a moment, his vision darkened, his senses dulled as the darkness sought to gain control. But Gustav's mind remained a fortress. His will was an unyielding force that refused to be swayed. Is that all you've got? Gustav's voice echoed within his own mind, taunting the corruption now struggling to establish dominance within him. The darkness thrashed, clawing at his consciousness. Its tendrils writhed as it tried to overpower him, but Gustav's presence was too powerful. Every attempt to consume him was met with resistance. Every tendril was blocked and cast aside as he began to assimilate the corruption instead. You thought you'd use me as a host? Foolish. In the one using you, Gustav's voice reverberated within the confines of his own mind as he tightened his grip on the shadowy force, drawing it deeper, trapping it within his psyche. The corruption shuddered, realizing too late that it had fallen into a trap. It struggled, flailing wildly, but Gustav's will was unbreakable. Slowly, he began to absorb the darkness, breaking it down, examining every fragment of its essence. As he delved deeper into its core, flashes of memories began to surface, moments from its existence, echoes of the malevolent intent that had driven it. The darkness had come from Nocturnus, a fragment of his power sent to wreak havoc. But beneath the layers of malice, there was something else, a memory of an object, a sense of purpose, a place, the sword. Gustav allowed his eyes to close, focusing on the fragments of memories he had taken from the dark corruption. Somewhere within those faint glimpses was the answer he needed, and he could almost feel the sword's presence, like an echo calling out to him from across the vast expanse of the universe. In his mind's eye, a hazy vision began to sharpen, the sword embedded deep in the ground of a distant, desolate world. The environment was half erased, the remnants of a cracked planet, its other half fractured into a floating ring of jagged rock and frozen debris. This world was bathed in an unnatural, eerie glow, almost as if it were a void in itself. Just as Gustav reached for more clarity, the echo in his mind suddenly sharpened. It's there, he murmured, locking onto a faint sensation of cold, malevolent energy. But before Gustav could fully register the location, a booming, cold voice echoed through his mind, ripping through his concentration. The darkness is mine to command, outworldly. Nocturnus snarled with contempt and hatred. You may have glimpsed it, but you will never find it. Gustav's grip on the darkness shattered. The remnants of the corrupted energy forcibly pulled from his mind, leaving him momentarily disoriented. The vision of the fractured planet dissolved, fading to black as Nocturnus severed any connection Gustav had to the darkness. Nocturnus, Gustav voiced with a tone of low frustration. He lifted his hand, dissolving the crystalline cage surrounding the city as he descended back to the streets. A moment later, Endrik appeared beside him, having blinked down from the sky. What happened? Endrik questioned with an expression concern. Gustav exhaled before filling Endrik in on everything that had gone down, and how he just lost the corruption he assimilated. I caught a glimpse of the sword, but just for a moment. The sword is embedded somewhere out there still in half of that torn, desolate world. But before I could see where it was exactly, Nocturnus broke in and took the corruption back. I lost the location. Endrik's shoulders slumped as his face contorted with frustration. So we're back to square one? Gustav shook his head. Not quite. I saw two distinct features. A hazy teal planet in the background and an unnatural light, almost void-like, surrounding it. If we can find a world with those features, well, find the sword. Endrick's gaze hardened. All right, that's something to go on, but we'll need to be thorough. A hazy teal planet and an eerie glow. There can't be many places like that. Gustav nodded in agreement. It'll be a difficult task, but it's our best lead. Endrick looked determined. Then let's get started. We'll go through every record of worlds that have been impacted by this corruption. I'm not letting Nocturnus keep us from stopping him. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, EE and Elevra were locked in a relentless chase. Their once sturdy spacecraft was now battered and torn. Its shielding had long cracked. Sparks were flying from its engines as it struggled to hold together. 4 days, the Gustavo Alliance member who had been hunting them had trailed them without rest. It was like a dark shadow that tore through space and time to follow them wherever they tried to hide. EE's hands moved rapidly across the console, his eyes focused as he glanced back at Elevra, who was seated beside him, looking exhausted but resolute. We're losing the shields. Her voice was tight with concern. If he gets through again, we won't last another attack. EE gritted his teeth while opening another vortex with a snap of his fingers. We're not giving up just yet, he replied while forcing their ship through the swirling portal and into a different section of space. As they emerged, a tense silence filled the ship. For a moment, it seemed as if they had managed to evade their pursuer. But then, the silence shattered as another rip in space appeared before them. The same dark figure stepped out. His eyes gleamed with a twisted amusement as he closed the distance between them once again. Damn it, he's persistent, he muttered in clear frustration. Elevra looked at him as a calmness settled over her face despite the situation. I think it's time we stop running. We need to face him. He glanced at her in surprise. Are you sure? You were against it before. Elevra smiled with a determined glint in her eye. That was before. I didn't have you then, but now I do. Let's do this together. Their eyes met, and there was a moment of unspoken understanding between them. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers, his expression softening as he whispered, Then let's give him a fight hell never forget, or we'll forget because he definitely will die. Ha ha, shut up, Elevra chuckled lightly. Without another word, he leaned in and they shared a brief, fierce kiss. As they pulled away, they were both ready to face the figure. Almost on cue, the dark figure's voice echoed through the void of space, a sinister edge to his words. So, you two lovebirds have finally decided to stop running, have you? He sneered while crossing his arms. I must admit, this has been one of the longest chases I've ever had to embark on. Normally, I kill my prey instantly, but I suppose this was worth the exercise. You too have chosen a fine place for your burial ground. He gestured around them, where only empty outer space stretched for hundreds of millions of miles, nothing but the faint glimmer of stars in the distance. EE and Elevra both stepped out of their ruined spacecraft as their bodies floated in the vast expanse, facing down the relentless Gustavo Alliance member with a calm, deadly focus. You've chased us long enough like a junkie that can't seem to get enough of the high, EE stated with a cold tone. It ends here. The man smirked, tilting his head with a mocking expression. Bold words, but words are meaningless without power to back them up. I'll enjoy ripping the both of you apart. Elevra's gaze hardened as the purple energy in her third eye beginning to pulse with power. You talk too much. Let's see if you can fight half as well as you threaten. The figure's face twisted in rage, and with a roar, he launched himself at them. His fists crackled with dark energy as he closed the gap. EE and Elevra moved, as one in synergy honed by years of combat experience and the trust they shared. EE snapped his fingers. opening a vortex just as the man's fist was about to connect. The man's punch hit empty space as he was pulled into the portal, only to reappear on the opposite side of EE, who was already prepared. With a quick move, EE swung his arm in an arc, releasing a concentrated blast of violet energy that slammed into the man, sending him careening backward. Chapter 16, Oh, to Look at the Skies. Chapter 16, Oh, to Look at the Skies, author's note. Unedited chapter, Elevra didn't waste a second. She raised her hand, her third eye glowing intensely as she unleashed a beam of concentrated energy straight toward their pursuer. The man barely managed to twist out of the way. The edge of the beam grazed his shoulder, and leaving a trail of smoldering, burnt flesh. He growled while clutching his shoulder, his eyes blazing with fury. Unfortunately, that isn't enough to stop me. You're nothing but insects compared to me. Then we'll just have to prove you wrong. Elevra shot back, her voice steady and unwavering. They clashed once again. A flurry of attacks exchanged in the endless void of space. The Gustavo Alliance member struck out with a savage intensity, his fists creating shockwaves that rippled through the stars. But EE and Elevra moved in perfect harmony, evading his attacks, countering with precision and speed. EE opened portals to redirect the man's attacks, turning his own strength against him, while Elevra unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, her power growing with each strike. They wore him down slowly, chipping away at his defenses, frustrating him with every missed blow. Enough! The man roared, summoning a massive surge of energy as he prepared to unleash a devastating attack. But EE saw it coming, his eyes narrowing as he whispered to Elevra, **** now. Together, they moved in sync, closing in on him from both sides. As the man released his attack, EE opened a portal, redirecting the blast back at him, while Elevra struck from the opposite side with a focused beam that pierced through his defenses. Caught in his own attack and Elevra's energy, the man let out a howl of agony, his form disintegrating under the combined assault. As his body faded into nothingness, EE and Elevra floated there in silence, the empty stretch of space around them a stark reminder of the battle they had just survived. They turned to each other, exhaustion etched on their faces, but there was also a deep sense of satisfaction in their eyes. ***, we did it, ***, Elevra murmured, her voice soft, a hint of disbelief in her tone. EE gave her a small, triumphant smile. ***, together. We're unstoppable. They drifted closer, sharing a moment of silent victory, the vastness of space stretching out before them as they prepared to return home, knowing they had faced the darkness and won. SSS Empress Daria, with her authoritative bearing, still managed to engage in light-hearted banter, showing a more relaxed side of herself that was rarely seen. Nearby, EE, Falco, Eldris, Endrick, and Rhea were having the time of their lives at the shore. EE's melanin skin glistened in the sunlight, his wet, bushy afro hair bouncing as he moved. His infectious laughter filled the air as he cracked jokes and splashed water at his friends. EE, you look like a sea monster with that hair, Falco teased while ducking to avoid another splash. Oh yeah, EE retorted with a grin. At least I don't look like a rat that got drowned in milk. Falco, Eldris had built an impressive sandcastle, much to the admiration of the others. Check this out, he said proudly, gesturing to his creation. A castle fit for a king. Eldris rarely ever showed this childish side of him, so it is quite heartwarming to see him playing around like this. Endrick dashed around with youthful energy, making small crabs float from the middle of the ocean. Got one, he exclaimed while holding up a tiny crab for everyone to see before gently releasing it back into the water. Ryalot at Endrick's antics and joined in the fun. Soft fluorescent lighting created a serene atmosphere, while a large window offered a breathtaking view of the moonlit ocean. A small seating area with plush chairs and a coffee table invited relaxation, and the bathroom, visible through an open door, boasted a deep soaking tub and a rainfall shower. Gustav sat in one of the chairs, his eyes fixated on the holographic system notification that hovered in front of him. 5-year quest completed, 1/2 become the world's strongest mixed blood, issuing rewards. He had been staring at it for days, the mystery of the delayed reward gnawing at him. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Before getting up and crossing the room, as expected, he opened the door to find Angie standing there. "Hey," she greeted softly, stepping inside when he motioned for her to enter. "Hey, Angie," Gustav replied, closing the door behind her. "What's up?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, her eyes searching his. "I wanted to talk to you." Gustav nodded, leading her to the seating area. They sat down, the soft cushions sinking under their weight. "What's on your mind?" Angie took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what happened during the trial. How did you manage to dominate the darkness and regain consciousness? You're really Gustav, right?" Gustav's expression grew serious. "It's not something I managed to do easily," he began. "I've been fighting that darkness since the day I saved you. That was the reason I chose to be unconscious in the first place. It provided me a better chance." Angie listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. "But you managed to control it. How?" "I didn't really dominate it. I just isolated it using the 3-in-1 golden body. It allowed me to compartmentalize the darkness, keep it confined to one area." He lifted his shirt, revealing the left side of his abdomen where a dark, swirling pattern was etched into his skin. The sight of it was both mesmerizing and unsettling. "This is where I've isolated the darkness," he explained. "It could increase my strength to unprecedented heights, but it would also make me lose my mind. That's why I've decided to keep it isolated forever." Angie's eyes widened in surprise and curiosity. She reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the dark pattern. "It's incredible," she whispered as her touch sending a jolt of electricity through Gustav's body. "I mean, you're incredible," she added. Gustav shivered at her touch, feeling the electricity of her fingers on his bare skin. He gently grabbed her hand to stop it from continuously tracing the pattern as their eyes locked in an intense gaze. "Angie," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Their faces drew closer, the air between them charged with an electric, romantic tension. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them. Their breaths mingled briefly as their lips met in a passionate kiss. The kiss soon deepened, and their hands began to explore each other. Gustav's fingers trailed down her back, feeling the smooth fabric of her dress, while Angie's hands moved to his chest, tugging at his shirt. They pulled back for a moment, their eyes filled with desire and need. "Gustav," Angie breathed, her voice husky with emotion. "Angie," he replied, his voice equally filled with longing. They moved with a sense of urgency, their clothes discarded piece by piece. Gustav's shirt fell to the floor, followed by Angie's dress. They stood there for a moment, taking in each other's forms, their hearts racing. The room seemed to glow with a soft, golden light as they came together again, their bodies pressing close. Gustav lifted Angie, carrying her to the bed where they continued to kiss, their passion intensifying with each passing second. As they lay down, the softness of the bed enveloping them, Gustav and Angie let their desires take over. Their movements were a dance of love and need, their touches gentle and urgent all at once. They whispered each other's names, their voices filled with emotion, as they became lost in the moment. Gustav left a trail of kisses down Angie's soft skin, causing her to shiver each time in excitement. She could feel something hard and thick poking her belly region. She instinctively reached out to grab it. Chapter 1603 The Higher the Risk. Chapter 1603 The Higher the Risk. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The realization that this powerful tool came at the ultimate price left a bitter taste in their mouths. The previously enthusiastic dignitary with shimmering scales was the first to break the silence. Grand Commander, this news is devastating. How can we ask our warriors to make such a sacrifice? Cheyenne nodded, his face reflecting the inner turmoil he felt. I understand your concerns. This is not a decision to be taken lightly, but we are faced with an existential threat. The beings of the Dark Plane will not show mercy, and our universe is at stake. We must weigh the cost of using this tool against the potential destruction of all we hold dear. An ethereal figure from the mystic enclave spoke up. We must ensure that those who choose to use this tool are fully aware of the consequences and are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. It is a heavy burden, but one that may be necessary to save countless lives. Another delegate with metallic skin and a deep, rumbling voice addressed the room. Indeed, we may have brave warriors, but we cannot simply send them to their deaths without exploring every possible alternative. Are there no other options, Grand Commander? Cheyenne took a deep breath. We are continuing our research, and we are exploring every possible avenue. But as of now, this amplification tool is our best chance to confront the Dark Plane on equal footing. We must prevent the final premonition, as these efforts are crucial to our survival. The room erupted in a mix of voices. Some agreed while others disagreed. Grand Commander Cheyenne allowed the discussions to continue for a moment before raising his hand again. Please, everyone, I understand how difficult it is to digest what I've told you. However, we must move forward with caution and unity. We need volunteers from every planet under the Alliance who understand the stakes and are willing to make this sacrifice. We must also continue to work together to find other solutions. Our universe's survival depends on our combined efforts. The delegates nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting resolve. As the meeting continued, the delegates worked together to develop a plan. They discussed how to use the amplification tool strategically. Each step was carefully considered, with the understanding that the stakes had never been higher. Gustav had been in Dimension 6 for what felt like an eternity. The passage of time seemed distorted in this place. The realm itself was like an empty city, maintaining its mechanical and incredibly futuristic constructs despite the desolation that had befallen Humbad. Gustav found himself in awe of the towering structures and the smooth nests of the buildings that defied gravity. The buzzing of machines seemed to operate on their own, defying the decay of time. Yet, there was a haunting emptiness, a sense of loss that permeated every corner. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional whir and click of the constructs. Gustav had spent most of his time in a particular construct, an enormous chamber filled with holographic displays and intricate machinery. This construct was a one of origins. Gustav had been moving around since, and found this one which was currently showing him planet Humbad's origin. The place reconstructed its planet history in vivid detail, like he was witnessing the occurrences, as though he lived in such times. The chamber flickered and shifted, creating a panoramic view of Humbad in its prime. The advanced technology brought the past to life, allowing him to walk through the city as it had once been, filled with vibrant energy and life. So this is how it used to look? Gustav whispered to himself. He felt a deep sense of connection to the place, as if he were witnessing a part of his own heritage. The playback showed bustling streets filled with the inhabitants of Humbad with fluid and graceful movements, their clothes, movement machinery, and everything was just out of this world. It was inconceivable. These people, Gustav thought, they were so advanced, so full of life. What happened to them? As he walked through the city, he felt a pang of sadness. He hadn't even had the time to properly think about what had happened to Miss Amy or grieve her loss. The current objective had consumed him, driving him forward with relentless determination. In as much as he wanted to grieve Miss Amy's sacrifice for him to be here, so he knew he had to keep the ball rolling. "Miss Amy," he murmured, "I won't let your sacrifice be in vain." The construct shifted, showing the once thriving city beginning to fall into disarray. The vibrant lights dimmed, the streets grew emptier, and the inhabitants seemed to fade away. Gustav watched as the planet's decline played out before him. The advanced technology unable to prevent the inevitable decay, he reached out to touch one of the holographic figures, a young child with wide, curious eyes. His hand passed through the image, and the child dissolved into a cascade of light. "It's moving too fast," Gustav voiced aloud. The playback continued, showing scenes of chaos and destruction. The once proud buildings crumbled, and the ground split open, revealing the molten core beneath. The inhabitants of Humbad fought desperately to save their world, but their efforts were in vain. The planet was dragged into the stagnant, siderous void, its fate sealed by forces beyond their control. "Slow down," Gustav stated. Everything immediately paused at this moment. "Take it back and reduce the speed. I want to properly digest it all." It was like the construct had a mind of its own. It began to rescind at a rapid pace. The whole playback restarted, giving Gustav a detailed showdown of planet Humbad's past. As the constructive surroundings shifted and reformed around him, Gustav was transported back in time, witnessing the truth about how everything began. Humans have always believed that we were amongst the first intelligent species, Gustav thought, watching the scenes unfold. But the Slarkovs were here long before us. Their civilization was thriving while Earth was still in its infancy. The city came to life, filled with beings that bore a striking resemblance to humans but with distinct animalistic features. Some had horns curling elegantly from their heads, others had elongated ears, and many had scaly or iridescent skin that shimmered. The playback showed the bustling streets of Humbad, filled with the daily activities of its inhabitants. Advanced vehicles zipped through the air, and towering buildings gleamed with the reflection of the twin suns in their sky, the architecture being far beyond anything Gustav had ever seen. There were energy towers everywhere, and devices that didn't need physical charge. As the solar system was displayed, Gustav recognized some things and was shocked. Earth was a neighboring planet in their solar system, Gustav voiced, as the construct shifted to show the cosmic relationship between Humbad and Earth. It was so close that the distance between them was shorter than the distance from Earth to Mercury. The scene changed, showing Earth as a barren, lifeless world. The planet's surface was a desolate landscape, devoid of the flora and fauna that would one day flourish there. But it looks like Earth didn't even have humans back then. Just how far back is this? Gustav was still utterly surprised. In stark contrast, Humbad was a vibrant, thriving world teeming with life and advanced civilizations. Humbad had already borne intelligent species for millennia, Gustav mused. The Slarkovs were the most intelligent, and their technology still surpasses that of Earth even till today. The playback shifted again, showing the development of the Slarkovs' technology. Gustav watched as they harnessed the power of their planet's natural resources, creating energy sources that were clean and inexhaustible. They built towering structures that reached into the sky, and some that lived in the sky with elegant and efficient designs. The Slarkovs had achieved a level of technological sophistication that seemed almost magical. They were so far ahead, Gustav thought. Their understanding of science and technology was unparalleled. Earth only got the short end of the stick. The scenes shifted to show the Slarkovs' daily lives. Gustav saw families gathered together, sharing meals and stories. He saw scholars and scientists working diligently in their laboratories, pushing the boundaries of knowledge and discovery. He saw artists creating breathtaking works of beauty. The Slarkovs truly bore many similarities to Earth. They were so much like humans, Gustav realized, but much more united from the looks of things. The past continued to unfold before Gustav, revealing more layers of the Slarkovs' history and the challenges they faced. The playback showed a time when Humbad existed in an era dominated by powerful beings who were essentially deities. These beings possessed unimaginable power, and their very presence could alter the fabric of reality. Gustav watched in awe as the surroundings shifted to show these deities titanic figures of immense strength and majesty that existed deep in the solar system. Their origins were unknown. The only known fact was that they ruled the cosmos and had existed since the beginning of time. Chapter 1604 Fan the Flames. Chapter 1604 Fan the Flames, author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav watched in surprise as the playback depicted the colossal battle in space. The deities clashed with unimaginable force, their energies creating shock waves that rippled through the cosmos. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble under the weight of their conflict. Not again, Gustav thought. The battle reached a catastrophic climax when one of the deities was struck down. Usually, deities were immortal, but the only threat to a deity's immortality was another deity. The defeated deity's corpse, which was massive beyond comprehension, began to drift through space. The playback highlighted the sheer scale of the body, which was as massive as the combination of more than 30 planets. It was incredibly colossal. As the deity's corpse floated toward Humbad's solar system, the sun was blotted out, casting the planet into darkness. The holographic images showed the Slarkovs looking up at the sky in terror and disbelief. Their world plunged into an eerie twilight. From Bolton, the 45th addressed his people in the aftermath of the catastrophe. He stood on a platform within Dimension 6. "My fellow Slarkovs," he said, his voice steady but filled with sorrow, "we face a challenge unlike any we have encountered before. A shadow has been cast over our world, and we must come together to find a way through this darkness." "Chief from Bolton, what can we do? Our crops are failing, and our energy reserves are depleting without the sun. How will we survive?" A Slarkov asked. From Bolton, the 45th responded with a tone of understanding. "We will use the power of Dimension 6 to sustain ourselves," he replied. "We have faced great challenges before, and we have always found a way to overcome them. We must remain united and work together to find solutions." While it is well known that Dimension 6 could solve any problem, the problem had to be within the vicinity of the planet, and not in outer space. This meant they couldn't ask Dimension 6 to get rid of the deity's corpse, and even if they could, it wouldn't work due to it being the corpse of an actual deity. So they had to consider a different approach. Gustav watched as the construct showed the Slarkovs mobilizing to address the crisis. They dimensioned 6 to create artificial light sources, attempting to replicate the sun's rays to keep their crops alive. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to develop new technologies that could sustain them in the prolonged darkness. In one scene, Gustav saw a group of scientists gathered around a large device that emitted a powerful golden light. "This should help keep the crops growing," one of the scientists said, adjusting the settings. "It's not a perfect solution, but it will buy us some time." From Bolton, the 45th visited the laboratories, offering his support and encouragement. "Your work is vital to our survival," he told the scientists. "We must use every resource at our disposal to ensure that our people have what they need to endure this crisis." Despite their efforts, the prolonged darkness began to take its toll. The playback showed scenes of hardship and struggle, with the Slarkovs facing food shortages and energy crises. The once thriving society was now grappling with the harsh reality of their situation. They did their best to keep working to find solutions and survive. The playback continued, depicting the grim reality the Slarkovs faced after the death of the deity and the resultant eclipse of their sun. The initial challenge of surviving in darkness was compounded by a new and insidious threat, an ashy sand-like pollution that emitted from the deity's corpse. This pollution began to spread through space, turning into a malevolent force that swallowed up orbital bodies, including moons and satellites. Gustav watched as the construct showed the spread of this pollution. It moved with a sinister, creeping inevitability, engulfing everything in its path. The Slarkovs, already struggling with the loss of sunlight, now faced an even greater existential threat. "We must protect ourselves," from Bolton, the 45th declared, his voice resolute as he addressed the council. "This pollution is unlike anything we've encountered before. We need to act quickly to safeguard our planet." The council members and scientists came together in agreement to work quickly on a solution. One of the scientists spoke up. "We have developed barriers using the energy from Dimension 6, she said. "These barriers should be able to hold off the pollution and give us time to find a more permanent solution." From Bolton, the 45th looked at the council members, determination in his eyes. "Let's implement these barriers immediately. Every second counts." The playback shifted to show the Slarkovs working tirelessly to erect the multilayered barriers. The barriers shimmered with an ethereal light, forming a protective shield around Humbad. As the barriers were activated, the ashy sand-like pollution met with resistance. The barriers held strong, repelling the malevolent force and preventing it from reaching the planet's surface. The Slarkovs breathed a collective sigh of relief after seeing their efforts pay off. From Bolton, the 45th addressed the people of Humbad with reassurance. "The barriers are holding, and we are safe for now. We continue to seek a permanent solution to this threat." The playback showed the Slarkovs returning to their daily lives, their spirits lifted by the temporary reprieve. However, the shadow of the pollution still loomed large. Months turned into years, and the barriers continued to hold. The Slarkovs used this time to develop new technologies and strategies to combat the pollution. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, searching for a way to neutralize the threat permanently. In one scene, Gustav watched as a group of scientists gathered in a high-tech laboratory, their faces etched with determination. "We've made some progress," one of them said, pointing to a holographic display. "We've developed a prototype device that might be able to disperse the pollution." From Bolton, the 45th, who was present in the lab, listened intently. "Excellent work," he said. "How soon can we test it?" The scientist hesitated. "We're still in the early stages of testing. We need more time to ensure it's safe and effective." From Bolton, the 45th nodded. "Understood. Keep me updated on your progress. The safety of our people depends on it." The scientists did try to test this device, but unfortunately, it wasn't as effective as they would have liked it to be. No matter how much of the sandy ash-like substance they dispersed, it always found a way to replicate. It was like they were just wasting their time. Despite their best efforts, the situation took a turn for the worse. The playback showed the barriers beginning to falter, the relentless pressure of the pollution wearing them down. Cracks appeared in the shimmering shield and things were starting to get very dire. The playback showed the relentless assault of the as-high sand-like pollution against the barriers. The Slarkovs watched in despair as their protective shield continued to weaken and crack. Despite their best efforts, it seemed that all hope was lost. From Bolton, the 45th stood in the command center, his face etched with worry. "We've done everything we can," he said to his advisors. "The barriers won't hold much longer. We need a miracle." Just as the situation seemed dire, a bright light appeared in the sky, cutting through the darkness. The playback showed a figure descending from the heavens, his form glowing with an otherworldly radiance. As he landed on the surface of Humbad, the light around him dimmed to reveal a deity who had taken on a human form. How could one tell that he was a deity? For starters, he got through the barrier with ease and passed the sandy ash-like substance without any trouble. not to mention his two silver eyes that glowed like light bulbs and the majestic presence he carried. The Slarkovs watched in awe as the deity walked among them. He raised his hand, and the ashy sand-like pollution that had been attacking the barrier began to gather into a swirling mass above his head. "Who are you?" From Bolton the 45th asked, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He knew it was a deity, but subconsciously still spat this question out. The deity looked at him with kind, ancient eyes. "I am a guardian of balance who came to rectify the harm caused by the battles of my kin," he said. "I apologize for the destruction and chaos that has befallen your world." Gustav watched in amazement as the deity continued to gather the pollution, forming it into a compact, pulsating ball of dark energy. The malevolent force that had been swallowing up orbital bodies was now contained, its threat neutralized, and it had been done with so much ease that no one would doubt the authenticity of the person before them. The deity then raised his other hand, and the skies began to clear. The remains of the fallen deity and the pollution that had darkened their world dissipated, revealing the sun once more. Light flooded the planet, and the Slarkovs cheered in relief and joy. "Thank you," Friend Bolton the 45th said, bowing deeply. "You have saved my people." Chapter 16:05 Severe Consequences. Chapter 16:05 Severe Consequences. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav's journey to the vestige continued, the gravitational density now almost overwhelming. He took a deep breath, channeling his energy to stabilize himself as he closed the distance, his senses sharpening as he felt the vestige's power calling to him. At last, he arrived at his destination, a small, barren planet surrounded by swirling dust clouds and asteroid fragments. It was desolate, isolated, and untouched by time, a fitting resting place for something as powerful as a piece of the outworldly. As he descended toward the planet's surface, he could feel the vestige's energy thrumming beneath the ground, pulsing with a life of its own. He landed, stepping out onto the cold, cracked terrain, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the energy was strongest. He walked forward, feeling the power intensify with each step, the air growing heavy around him, as if the very atmosphere was charged with cosmic energy. Finally, he reached a towering, jagged rock formation, its surface etched with ancient markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. "Asterisk, asterisk, this is at asterisk, asterisk," Gustav whispered, his hand reaching out to touch the stone. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the entire structure pulsed with energy, a wave of raw power surging into him, flooding his senses with memories, visions, fragments of a life he had once known. He gasped as the energy coursed through him, his body absorbing the vestige, his mind filling with the knowledge and strength it contained. For a brief moment, he felt whole, as if he had regained a part of himself that had been missing for centuries. As the power settled, he turned his attention to raw assimilation. His genetic transformation bloodline already granted him an assimilation ability, but this one was fundamentally different. With genetic transformation, he could assimilate with living tissue, people, aliens, or organisms. However, raw assimilation opened up a realm of new possibilities. He could merge with non-living matter, potentially even something as vast as a moon or as powerful as a star. The idea was exhilarating, the potential applications endless. As Gustav considered these new bloodlines, his thoughts shifted to the 2 skill evolution cards he had also received as part of his rewards. He pondered which skills to evolve next, knowing that his choices could significantly impact his future capabilities. Before he could make a decision, he recalled the dinner he had agreed to have with Angie's family. Realizing the time, Gustav decided it was best to get ready. He headed to his bedroom, which was a minimal yet compact and cozy setup. He stepped into the ensuite bathroom to freshen up. The shower, with its multiple jets and rainfall feature, was a welcome respite. As the warm water cascaded over him, he allowed himself a moment to relax and clear his mind. Once freshened up, Gustav chose a casual yet stylish outfit: dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored red jacket. He checked his reflection in the mirror, ensuring he looked presentable for dinner. Satisfied, he made his way to the living room, where he grabbed his keys and phone. Before leaving, he sent a quick message to Angie: "Heading out now. See you soon." A few moments later, his phone beeped with Angie's reply: "Can't wait. Moi." Gustav smiled and pocketed the device as he stepped towards the balcony area. It would seem that his location had been revealed, so the press was cooped up at the entry point of the skyscraper. The world before him came to a pause as Gustav moved, leapt into the air, and vanished. Gustav stood outside Angie's apartment building with some flowers in his grasp and a slight smile playing on his lips. As he walked up to the apartment door, it swung open to reveal Mr. and Mrs. Villendrobadia. Mrs. Villendrobadia displayed a welcoming smile. "Good evening, Gustav," Mrs. Villendrobadia greeted warmly. "We're so glad you could join us tonight." Mr. Villendrobadia extended his hand. "It's good to see you again, Gustav. Come in, make yourself at home." Gustav shook his hand and stepped inside. "Thank you for having me." The apartment was cozy and inviting, with family holographic photos adorning a side of the wall and the scent of a delicious meal wafting through the air. The dining table was set with elegant dishware, and a variety of mouth-watering dishes were spread out, indicating the effort the family had put into the evening. As they moved into the living room, Gustav noticed Phil, Angie's little brother. Phil was no longer the small boy Gustav remembered. Despite being 15, he was almost fully grown, with a build that hinted at his future strength. "Hey, Phil," Gustav greeted with a nod, genuinely surprised by his growth. "You've grown a lot since I last saw you." Phil smiled shyly, his voice deeper than before. "Hey, Gustav." "Yeah, it's been a while." Angie appeared, a radiant smile on her face as she walked over to Gustav and linked her arm through his. "Come on, everyone, let's sit down for dinner." They all gathered around the table as the atmosphere was filled with warmth. The meal was a delightful affair, with an array of flavors that showcased Mrs. Villendrobadia's culinary skills. Gustav tried not to compare her cooking to that of Boss Danzo, since he made a habit of doing that for every meal he had. As they ate, they chatted and reminisced about the past, sharing stories and laughter that bridged the time and experiences they had missed. They remembered how things used to be much simpler back in their previous neighborhood before Gustav and Angie joined the MBO. Mr. Villendrobadia recounted an amusing tale from Angie's childhood, causing everyone to laugh. "Remember the time Angie tried to build a rocket in the backyard? She was so determined to reach the stars." Angie groaned, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Dad, not that story again." Gustav chuckled, his heart warming at the familial banter. "I'd love to hear more about Angie's childhood adventures." Mrs. Villendrobadia smiled. "She was always so fearless, much like she is now." After the meal, as they moved to the living room for dessert, Mr. and Mrs. Villendrobadia grew more serious. Mr. Villendrobadia cleared his throat and looked at Gustav with sincerity. "Gustav, there's something we need to say," he began. "When Angie disappeared, we were devastated. We were angry and scared, and we took a lot of that out on you. We were wrong." Mrs. Villendrobadia nodded with a remorseful look. "We're so sorry for how we treated you, Gustav. Thank you for saving our daughter." "You don't need to apologize. I made a promise to protect Angie, and I failed. I can't blame any of you, but I'll make sure to keep that promise in the future." Mr. Villendrobadia's voice was filled with emotions. "Thank you, Gustav. You've done more for our family than we can ever repay." Phil, who had been silent, spoke up. "Gustav, can I talk to you outside for a moment?" Gustav nodded, standing up. Of course. They stepped out into the cool evening air. the city lights twinkling in the distance. Phil looked at Gustav with a serious look. I need to apologize too, Phil began, his voice trembling slightly. For the longest time, I hated you. When Angie was missing, I hated myself for looking up to you. I blamed you for everything. Gustav remained silent, giving Phil the space to express his feelings. Phil continued, his eyes filled with regret. When Angie returned and told us what happened, how you sacrificed yourself to save her, I realized how stupid I'd been. You must love her just like we do, maybe even more. When she was lost, you must have been hurt too, right? Gustav placed a reassuring hand on Phil's shoulder. I was Phil, but what matters is that Angie is safe now. And that's all I care about. Tears welled up in Phil's eyes as he looked at Gustav. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Thank you for saving my sister. Gustav smiled gently, patting Phil's back. Don't worry about it. We all went through a lot. What's important is how it turned out. Phil wiped his eyes, his voice breaking. Thank you, big brother Gustav. Really? They stood there for a moment in silence, staring into the distance, with smiles on their faces. After a while, Angie appeared at the door, a soft smile on her face. Everything okay out here? She asked. Phil nodded with red eyes, but a lighter expression. Yeah, thanks, big brother Gustav. It was obvious that he'd been carrying a weight of guilt all this time, and now that he had gotten it off his chest, he felt better. He headed back inside, leaving Gustav and Angie alone. She walked up to him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. Thank you for talking to him, she said softly. Phil led a campaign when you were still unconscious and in custody before your trial. He rallied so many people trying to get justice for you. Gustav raised an eyebrow. Impressed? Really? Phil did that. Angie nodded. He looks up to you, Gustav. Even when he was angry, he still admired you. And when he realized how much you cared for me and put yourself on the line to save me, it made him want to fight for you. He's a good kid. You've got a great family. Angie, Gustav had a brief recollection of everything that happened when Angie was missing. Angie wrapped her arms around him while resting her head on his chest. As do you, because you're our family too. We're so lucky to have you, Gus. Gustav held her close, feeling the warmth of her embrace, perhaps in the lucky one. About a day later, Gustav sat in the living area of his luxurious penthouse. The evening was calm, but inside his mind, a storm of decisions brewed. He leaned back into the plush leather sofa, his thoughts fixated on the 2-skill evolution cards. These cards were potent, capable of transforming his abilities into something far more powerful and versatile. He brought up his system skills and abilities collection, causing a holographic panel to materialize before him. The list was long, over 200 skills and abilities which he had acquired over the years. However, only the skills that were maxed out could be evolved, and that narrowed his choices down to a handful of his most critical abilities. Skills and abilities: Lightning Blitz level 7, Sprint level max, Chop level max, Slash level max, God Eyes level max, Flight level 8, Combination level max, Super Jump level max, Strength Boost level 9, Bloodline Acquisition level max, Bloodline Hold level 8, Bloodline Transfer level max, Palm Strike level max, Silent Advancement level max, Energy Discharge level max, Miniature, Black Hole level 5, Recreation level max, Toxin Immunity level max. Chapter 1606 on the Search. Chapter 1606 on the Search author's note. Unedited chapter in the heart of a chaotic and gravity-warped region of space. Gustav hovered just above the rocky surface of a barren world. It bore no inhabitants. He had finally reached his destination. And beneath him, buried deep within the fractured ground, lay the second vestige of his original power. He could feel it humming like a heartbeat, resonating with the fragments he had already absorbed. This energy was familiar yet ancient, a part of himself he had long forgotten. Taking a deep breath, Gustav reached out and placed his hand against the surface. As soon as his skin made contact, the vestige reacted, sending a surge of power through him. The ground trembled beneath him, cracks snaking across the terrain as the energy rose up like a pulse, fusing into his very being. He closed his eyes, feeling the humanoid-shaped energy wrap around him, absorbing into his core. Every cell in his body seemed to awaken, and the sensation was almost overwhelming. His muscles tensed as a newfound strength coursed through him. It was only a mere extra 1% of his original strength, a fraction of his former glory. But even that small amount felt monumental. The outworldly, in his full power, was beyond what any ordinary being could comprehend. And now he could feel a sliver of that unimaginable force returning to him. Opening his eyes, Gustav felt the familiar rush of knowledge as another ability from his outworldly repertoire unlocked. He flexed his fingers, the power settling into his veins like a second skin. "Let's see what you've given me this time, asterisk, asterisk," he murmured to himself as he took a few steps back from the now dormant vestige. With a single thought, he extended his arm, and the air around him seemed to ripple. A faint, almost invisible sphere of energy enveloped him, flickering with a gentle, silver glow. Gustav clenched his fist, and the sphere expanded, stretching out over the entire landscape. Trees, rocks, and even the distant peaks began to bend under the force of his energy. With a flick of his wrist, he pulled it all back, compressing the sphere around him in a rush that sent a shockwave outward, creating a crater beneath him. "Not bad," he voiced with a satisfied tone. After a few more tests, Gustav leaped into the air, flying back toward his waiting spacecraft. The gravitational density continued to press against him, but it was barely noticeable. He reached the spacecraft and climbed aboard, setting his sights on the next vestige. "One more step closer," he murmured as he fired up the engines. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the universe, a small but robust spacecraft cut through the vast emptiness of space. Inside, Endrik, Rhea, and Circe were discussing the next steps in their journey. Circe had insisted on joining them, and after much debate, Endrik had finally agreed, unable to resist her determined gaze. "All right, team. Here's where we're at," Endrik said, leaning over the ship's navigation console. The database came through and cross-referenced the two distinct features that Gustav glimpsed, a hazy teal planet and an unnatural void-like light. Unfortunately, it returned not one, but 4 locations. Rhea, seated across from him with a frown, crossed his arms. "For locations? That means 3 of them are not correct?" "Yes," Endrik confirmed. "Great. We're going to need to hop across the galaxies to check each one." "Bingo," Endrik replied, bringing up a holographic map. "But that's our best shot. We'll need to visit each location and confirm which one actually holds the sword." Circe leaned in with a determined expression. "Determined. Then let's not waste time. We go in, check, and if it's not the one, we move on. Simple." Endrik glanced at her. "You make it sound easy, Circe. You realize these locations aren't exactly next door to each other, right?" Circe shrugged while displaying a smile. "Doesn't matter. We're doing this for Father. ID fly to the edge of the universe, if that's what it takes." Rhea chuckled, nodding approvingly. "You're relentless. I can see why you insisted on coming. But let's just hope these locations aren't crawling with the Alliance's goons. Or worse." Endrik pulled up the first destination, pointing to a distant star system marked on the map. "The first one's here, on the outskirts of the Ilvorn galaxy. We'll check it out and go from there. Everyone ready?" "Ready," Circe and Rhea replied in unison. The ship buzzed as Endrik punched in the coordinates, and in an instant, they leaped into hyperspace. The stars outside immediately blurred into streaks of light. After what felt like numerous hours, the ship slowed, emerging from hyperspace on the edge of a star system where the first of the 4 potential locations awaited. Outside the ship, a massive teal-hued planet loomed before them, surrounded by swirling clouds and faint, greenish light that gave the atmosphere an ethereal quality. "Well, that's something," Rhea murmured, staring at the planet. "Almost looks like we're in a dream." Circe's eyes narrowed as she peered out the window. "I don't like it. Something feels off." Endrick nodded in agreement, adjusting the ship's scanners. "Let's keep our guard up. This might be the place, but it could also be a trap. Stay sharp, both of you." They descended through the atmosphere, landing in a remote area of the planet's surface where massive, sharp rocks jutted out of the ground like teeth. The surroundings were eerily quiet, with a pale mist clinging to the ground, casting strange shadows across the barren landscape. "I'll check the scanners for any signs of outworldly energy," Endrick said, adjusting the controls. As he worked, Circe and Rhea stepped out of the ship, keeping a close eye on the surrounding terrain. They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert as they scanned the area for any threats. "It's dead silent," Circe whispered, prepared to activate her bloodline at any time. "Too quiet." Rhea nodded. "Yeah, I don't like it either. Shouldn't we have bumped into extraterrestrials by now?" "Endrick, anything on the scanners?" Endrick's voice crackled over their communicators. "No outworldly energy detected yet, but there's a faint residual energy, something that could be connected. It's faint, though. If the sword was here, it's either well hidden or long gone. Let's sweep the area." They spread out, moving through the mist as they searched for any signs of the sword or clues pointing to its whereabouts. Nearly an hour went by with no luck. Endrick could scour the entirety of the planet within seconds, but the mist really made it difficult to cast one's senses like a net across this mysterious world. After some time, Endrick called them back to the ship. "Nothing here, just a residual energy field. Might be a remnant of some old relic, but not the sword. We're moving to the next location." "Well, at least we're one down," Rhea muttered while climbing back aboard. 3 more to go. Circe sighed, settling into her seat. "Uncle needs to be better with his choices. Don't call me that." Endrick snapped back. "Sorry, Uncle. You're older than me." "I don't think so, Uncle." "Shut up." "Sorry, Uncle. You little—" It almost seemed like Circe was trying to get Endrick mad on purpose, and yet her eyes remained clueless. "You know what? Forget it. Maybe we could crash into a sun and die so I can finally be rid of that godforsaken title." Endrick grumbled as he programmed the coordinates for the next location. You two really suit each other," Rhea chipped in from behind. "Go fuck yourself, Rhea," Endrick yelled from the pilot's seat. "No, really, think about it." "Shut up. I could become a godfather." "No. Gustav could become an uncle." "You're insane." Rhea kept jabbering away nonstop, and Endrick felt like death would be a very good relief at this moment. "Why did I pick these two?" He questioned his choices while shaking his head. "I hope we don't have to visit all 4. They jumped to hyperspace once more, speeding toward the next destination. As the stars streaked by outside the window, Endrick couldn't help but think about their mission. He knew that finding the sword was crucial, not just for Gustav, but for the fate of the universe itself. The second location took them to a desolate system on the edge of a black hole. The gravitational pull was intense, warping space around them as they approached. Whoever thought hiding a sword next to a black hole was a good idea deserves a punch, Rhea grumbled. Endrick carefully navigated the ship around the black hole's edge. "Stay focused. We've dealt with black holes before, and this won't be any different. Circe, keep an eye on the scanners. If there's anything here, we'll need to be quick." They circled the black hole, scanning the surrounding debris fields for any signs of the sword. The environment was dangerous, with massive chunks of rock and ice orbiting perilously close to the event horizon. But despite their careful search, they found nothing. Another dead end, Endrick voiced with a frustrated sigh. Chapter 1607 Identical Locations. Chapter 1607 Identical Locations Author's Note. Unedited chapter Another Dead End. Endrick voiced with a frustrated sigh as they finally broke away from the black hole. As Endrick skillfully piloted the ship around the gaping maw of the black hole, his attention was caught by a faint flickering in the distance. Just beyond the swirling gravitational chaos, he spotted a teal-hued planet. It wasn't static, nor was it consistent. It flickered in and out of existence like a mirage at the edge of his vision. Hold up! Endrick squinted through the viewport. He tapped a few buttons, magnifying the image, then called out, "Hey, you two, look at this. Do you see that?" Both Rhea and Cersei leaned over his shoulders, staring intently into the viewport. At first, the dark void of space revealed nothing unusual. But then, as if on cue, the teal planet shimmered back into view, hanging in space for a few moments before fading away again. "Did you see it?" Endrick asked, glancing between them with a spark of excitement and concern. Rhea's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, I caught it. That's no ordinary flicker." "Planets don't just phase like that," Cersei chipped in. Cersei's expression was a mix of fascination and unease. "It looks like the first planet we checked out, doesn't it? The color, the haziness, everything." Endrick nodded, gripping the controls. "It's weird, but in bringing us in closer. Hang tight." He eased the ship forward, carefully navigating past the intense gravitational forces. The black hole seemed to reach out, tugging at their vessel with an unrelenting grip. But Endrick maintained a steady course, pushing back with his telekinetic energy as they headed towards the flickering teal world. With every second, the planet became more real, until finally they crossed some unseen threshold and emerged in the planet's atmosphere. The shimmering faded, and the planet solidified, no longer vanishing in and out of existence. The ship touched down with a soft thud. Its engines powered down as Endrick, Rhea, and Cersei prepared to disembark. "All right, keep your guard up," Endrick warned, his voice low and tense. "This place, it looks exactly like the first planet, and that's not a good sign." They exited the ship, stepping onto the surface. The surroundings were almost haunting in their familiarity. Pointed rocks rose from the ground, casting long shadows under the teal sky. A pale mist clung to the ground, curling around their legs and filling the air with an unsettling chill. Cersei glanced around with a wary gaze. "This place, it's identical to the first planet. Same rock formations, same mist. Even the light feels the same. It's almost like we're back there." Rhea nodded while scanning the horizon. "I don't like this. It feels like a trick, but we're here now, so let's see what we can find." They split up, moving cautiously through the mist-covered terrain. Every detail seemed eerily familiar, down to the smallest crack in the rocks. They checked each crevice, examined every shadow, searching for any sign of the massive chunk of planet or the sword that Gustav needed. But no matter how thoroughly they searched, they found nothing. It was as if the planet were a hollow shell, an illusion designed to mislead them. Endrick kicked a rock and watched it skid across the ground. "This isn't right. We're going in circles and there's nothing here." Cersei's voice came through their communicators. "Uncle, Rhea, I just checked the northern ridge. It's clear. No signs of anything out of the ordinary." "Same here," Rhea replied, glancing around with a frown. "It's like we're on a ghost planet. This has to be some kind of trap, right?" Endrick sighed while rubbing his temples. "I don't know. There's got to be something we're missing here. Let's give it one more sweep, and if we still don't find anything, we'll regroup and head back to the ship." With heavy hearts and wary eyes, they resumed their search, but the result was the same. No matter how meticulously they combed the landscape, the planet remained barren, devoid of anything that could lead them to Gustav's sword. After another hour of fruitless searching, they returned to the ship, feeling a mixture of frustration and unease. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Gustav was piloting his own vessel, making his way to the next vestige. The gravitational field around him was thick, and the space itself seemed to shimmer, warping in strange patterns as he approached his destination. Just as he was preparing to enter a new galaxy, a flashing light on his control panel signaled an incoming alert. Ahead of him, a series of ships formed a perimeter in space. These were no ordinary vessels. They bore the emblem of the Universal Alliance, an interplanetary coalition led by some of the most powerful worlds, including Earth. This was the same alliance Gustav had a scuffle with in the past. As he approached, one of the ships hailed him, the signal crackling to life on his console. Gustav clicked the communicator, and a gruff voice filled the cockpit. "This is Universal Alliance Checkpoint Bravo 17. Halt your approach and prepare for inspection." Gustav rolled his eyes while muttering, "Such unnecessary delay." Nevertheless, he complied, slowing the ship to a stop as two Alliance vessels moved alongside him. A screen blinked on, displaying a tall, burly Alliance Corp officer with a bald, scaly head and a scar running down his cheek. His expression was one of forced professionalism, but there was a glint in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly who he was addressing. "Gustav Crimson," the officer voiced with a clipped tone. "We'll be conducting a routine inspection of your vessel. Stand by." "No problem. Anything to keep the galaxy safe, right?" Gustav replied with dry amusement. The officer's lips tightened, but he said nothing, gesturing to a subordinate to begin the scan. Gustav watched as a bright light washed over his ship, scanning every inch of the vessel's exterior. After a few moments, the officer's face reappeared on the screen. "You're clear, but ID advise against flying through restricted regions without checking in at designated checkpoints. You may be a well-known figure, but that doesn't exempt you from Alliance regulations." Gustav smirked while crossing his arms. "Noted. So, what's got the Alliance so riled up? Seems like you're running a pretty tight operation out here." The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. "We're on the lookout for a fugitive. A high-priority target. That's all you need to know." "A high-priority target? Huh? Must be serious if it's got you all out here patrolling the middle of nowhere." The officer's face hardened. "Your cooperation is appreciated, Mr. Crimson. We don't need your commentary." Gustav raised his hands in mock surrender. "You never know what could help. I've got places to be anyway. You're good to let me through now, right?" Gustav was being humble even though he knew none of them could stop him if he wanted to leave. The officer hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. You're clear. Just remember to be on your best behavior, Mr. Crimson. You might be powerful, but we're still the protectors of the cosmos." As the screen blinked off, Gustav smirked. He fired up the engines, pulling away from the checkpoint with accelerating speed. The gravitational forces resumed pressing down on the spacecraft as it drew closer and closer to the next vestige, but his thoughts lingered on the interaction with the Alliance. The fugitive they mentioned had seemed unimportant in the moment, but the description he had overheard was automatically stored in his mind. It was impossible for him to forget anything after all. Back in their own ship, Endrick, Rhea, and Circe regrouped, silently processing the strange experience on the flickering planet. "This has to be some sort of trick," Rhea voiced in confusion. "The fact that we found two planets with identical environments can't be a coincidence. It was one thing to both have teal looks, but it was something else entirely to have a completely identical ecosystem and environment." Endrick leaned back in his seat, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Could Nocturnus be behind this? I find it difficult to understand. since his powers doesn't have enough potency to create a whole world in this plane. Cersei looked between them. Maybe it's a delay tactic from someone else. If someone knows we're looking for the sword, keeping us here could buy them time to move it. Endrick's expression darkened as he considered her words. You might be right. If this is a fluke, we need to rescan. Rhea nodded. Agreed. If this place is a decoy, let's not stick around any longer than we have to. As they prepared the ship for departure, a sense of urgency settled over them. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. If someone was playing tricks here, they needed to isolate the fake from the real as soon as they could and figure out exactly what was going on. Chapter 1608 Alliance Fugitive. Chapter 1608 Alliance Fugitive Author's Note. Unedited chapters. Gustav hovered in deep space as the vast emptiness stretched out endlessly around him, broken only by the faint glimmer of stars. He had reached the next vestige of his power, nestled delicately between two large, icy moons orbiting a distant planet. The vestige pulsed faintly, casting a mythical glow that illuminated the dark surroundings, calling to him with the same sense of familiarity as the others. Without hesitation, he extended his hand, letting the energy of the vestige flow toward him. The force was overwhelming, flooding his being as it merged with him. This particular vestige brought yet another sliver of his original strength, a mere 2%, but it was significant enough to make him feel a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced since reclaiming his fragments. His body pulsed with newfound strength, and he felt yet another of his outworldly abilities unlock within him. After testing the effects of the boost briefly, Gustav turned and flew back to his spacecraft. He still had 5 more he needed to retrieve. He entered the ship, settling back into the cockpit as he set a course back on his path through space. But just as he turned the ship around, his senses caught onto something attaching itself to the ship. The ship sensors didn't go off, but his senses were too astute for anything to occur without his notice. What the... Something's attached to the ship, he muttered, glancing over the control panel as he searched for the source. But before he could investigate further, the flashing lights on his communicator signaled an incoming transmission. His screen lit up with the familiar insignia of the Universal Alliance, and in the next instant, the ship's speakers filled with a sharp, gruff voice. This is Checkpoint Bravo 17 of the Universal Alliance. Halt your ship immediately and prepare for inspection. Gustav let out an irritated sigh. Again, nevertheless, he slowed his ship and waited for the Alliance officers to close in. As before, 2 of their imposing vessels flanked his spacecraft. The same officer from earlier, the tall, scarred man with a stern expression and a hint of something personal in his gaze, appeared on the screen. Mr. Crimson, we're conducting another search, the officer announced with a curt tone. Gustav raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Another search? What a coincidence. I was just thinking of you, officer. The officer's eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed by Gustav's sarcasm. Well, be quick about this, Mr. Crimson. Gustav gave a mock sigh, glancing at the scanner display before him. You might want to start your search at the southern part of the ship's hull. I've got a feeling you'll find something interesting there. The officer frowned, giving Gustav a skeptical look before signaling his subordinates. A few moments later, one of the Alliance officers hovered close to the southern edge of the ship, carefully scanning the surface. Suddenly, a figure cloaked in a shimmering, camouflaged layer began to materialize, clinging to the hull. There! One of the officers shouted as the figure's camouflage faded, revealing a thin, wiry man with sharp features and a wild look in his eyes. Before anyone could react, the fugitive sprang forward, shoving one of the officers back with a powerful kick and darting into the open void of space. "Stop him!" the officer in command shouted, lunging forward as he aimed a glowing weapon, but the fugitive moved with astonishing speed, warping space around him as he vanished from sight, leaving only a faint ripple in his wake. The officer turned back toward Gustav in anguish. Mr. Crimson, you're coming with us for harboring a fugitive. Gustav let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. Harboring? You're not serious, are you? That guy was clinging to the outside of my ship. If I were harboring him, don't you think he'd be, inside? The officer's face darkened as he spoke with irritation. Your smart remarks won't save you, Crimson. You're coming with us for questioning one way or another. Gustav crossed his arms, giving the officer an unimpressed look. I'd rather not waste my time with that. Stay out of my way if you know what's good for you. Without waiting for a response, Gustav's form shimmered, and in an instant he vanished from the cockpit, reappearing millions of feet away from his ship. He darted through space at unfathomable speed, closing in on the fleeing fugitive. Ahead of him, he could see the fugitive's silhouette, nothing more than a tiny, distant shape moving at incredible speed. Gustav narrowed his eyes, extending his arm as he channeled his energy, focusing his vision on the figure racing through the stars. You're not getting away that easily, he murmured while clenching his fist. In the blink of an eye, he accelerated. Closing his fist made space fold around him, making him cross vast distances in a heartbeat. The fugitive was moving fast, but Gustav was faster, and within seconds he closed the gap, appearing directly behind the man. The fugitive barely had time to react before Gustav's hand shot out, grabbing him by the neck in a vice-like grip. The fugitive gasped, struggling in Gustav's hold, his limbs flailing as he tried to break free. Gustav held him effortlessly with a cold gaze as he tightened his grip just enough to subdue him. Going somewhere? Gustav questioned with a smirk. The fugitive's eyes widened in fear, his voice coming out in a strangled gasp. Let me go. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Gustav raised an eyebrow as his smirk widened. Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea. But am curious why hitch a ride on my ship. Seems like a dangerous game for someone so desperate to stay hidden. The fugitive's eyes flickered with panic, but he said nothing. His body tensed as he continued to struggle. Gustav gave him a slight shake, bringing him face to face. Come on, now. Don't make me work for it. Why were you hiding on my ship? The fugitive swallowed hard as his face contorted in fear and defiance. They'll kill me if I go back. I had no choice. I thought you could help. Help? Now that's funny. I don't make it a habit of helping stowaways, especially ones with bounty hunters on their tails, Gustav replied, coolly, his grip unyielding. But since you're here, maybe you can answer a few questions. Like, what exactly did you do to get the entire alliance out here looking for you? The fugitive's expression hardened, and for a moment, Gustav thought he might get an answer. But before the man could speak, a familiar, harsh voice cut through the void. Mr. Crimson, release the fugitive immediately. This is your last warning. Gustav rolled his eyes as he spotted the Alliance spacecraft closing in on their location. I've got him under control, officer. But if you want him so badly, come and get him. The Alliance ships closed in rapidly and made a stop not too distant from their position. Mr. Crimson, you're in violation of Alliance protocol. Release the fugitive and stand down, or well use force. Gustav glanced back at the approaching ships with an unamused expression. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Fine, have it your way. With a flick of his wrist, he loosened his grip on the fugitive just enough to give the man a brief moment of freedom. The fugitive hesitated, glancing between Gustav and the Alliance ships with a desperate expression. Gustav looked at him briefly before speaking with an icy tone. Run all you want, but if you make trouble for me next time, I won't be as generous. Without waiting for a response, Gustav released the fugitive, watching as he shot off into the distance, vanishing into the void once more. He turned to face the Alliance ships with his arms crossed as he waited for their next move. The officer's face displayed a look of annoyance as he leapt out of the spacecraft. You let him go, release the fugitive, and stand down, Weren't those your words? Gustav questioned while raising a brow. How could Wise? Now he's gone. The officer was speechless. You sound like you don't know what you want. Gustav remained unbothered by the current situation. The officer growled in response, Mr. Crimson. I suggest you return to your ship and prepare for questioning. You have aided and abetted a fugitive today. Gustav raised an eyebrow and replied with a calm voice edged with irritation. If you think I'm going to waste my time answering your questions, you're sorely mistaken. I have more important things to do than babysit your fugitive. So unless you have something useful to say, I'd suggest you move along. The officer's face turned red with anger, but before he could respond, Gustav's form shimmered, and in an instant he vanished, reappearing in his ship's cockpit as he activated the engines. I dare you to stop me. Chapter 1609 Same Occurrence. Chapter 1609 Same Occurrence Author's Note. Unedited chapter with a final, dismissive glance at the Alliance ships, he set his course for his next destination, leaving the frustrated officers and their elusive fugitive far behind. I dare you to stop me. Gustav's voice echoed from the ship, transmitting it to the Alliance comms as he sped off. Gustav's ship cut through the darkness, leaving the Alliance checkpoint and their chaos behind. He had more important matters to attend to, and he wasn't about to let a minor distraction derail his mission. The expanse of space lay quiet as Endrick, Rhea, and Circe drifted through the stars. Their ship seemed like a lone traveler in the vast cosmic sea. The interior of the vessel groaned softly. The interior dimmed lights further allowed the illumination of the constant glow of data screens to surround them. A week had passed since they departed from the flickering teal planet. Their destination now was the third possible location that matched the features Gustav had seen in his brief vision. Endrick leaned over the control panel, scanning the incoming data with a focused gaze. He had been tense since the second planet, its eerie similarity to the first unnerving him. A creeping suspicion had started to take root in his mind, one he couldn't shake, despite Rhea's and Circe's attempts to lighten the mood. I don't know. Endrick, Circe said, reclining in her seat with an amused smile as she twirled a strand of her silvery hair between her fingers. Maybe it's just a coincidence. It's a big universe, after all. Planets looking alike. Happens all the time, right? Rhea chuckled from the other side, tilting his head to look at Endrick with a casual, mischievous grin. Exactly. Who's to say we haven't just stumbled on some intergalactic copy-paste system? I mean, it would save on decoration costs. But Endrick barely glanced at them, his expression tense. Two identical planets in the same quadrant with no real differences? No, that's not a coincidence. Something's off. I don't like it. Circe still tried to maintain her light-hearted tone. Come on, Uncle. You can't take everything so seriously. We're on a wild hunt for a sword across a galaxy. Can't we at least laugh a bit on the way? Endrick gave her a sidelong look, unable to fully hide a smirk. He'll laugh when we've got the sword in our hands, and Gustav has what he needs to regain his power. Until then, stay sharp. Rhea stretched, placing his hands behind his head with a casual sigh. 2 days out from the next mystery planet. Until then, he'll just be here, kicking back and waiting for the next round of déjà vu. With a weary shake of his head, Endrick turned back to the panel, checking their progress. They were indeed 2 days from their destination, and he intended to use every moment wisely. For now, he was focused on keeping track of the energy signature head scan from the second planet. He wanted to see if it repeated on the third planet or if there was any deviation. Meanwhile, Circe decided to make her way to one of the quieter rooms of the ship. She knew that of the three, she was the least experienced. Her abilities lagged behind Rhea's and Endrick's. She sat cross-legged on the floor, closing her eyes as she began to channel her frost-related bloodline. Cold energy seeped from her palms, gathering in a faint mist around her, forming small, delicate snowflakes that drifted down. I need to be stronger, she whispered to herself, focusing intently as she continued to train. She didn't want to be a liability in this mission. She wanted to be useful. 2 days later, the ship emerged from hyperspace as the coordinates of the third location lit up on their map. Outside, the vastness of the new system stretched out before them. And as they approached the designated planet, Endrick's heart sank. It was identical to the first 2 planets. The teal-hued atmosphere gave the world a surreal glow, and the pointy rock formations that rose from the surface looked all too familiar. The pale mist that clung to the ground gave the landscape an eerie stillness, and Endrick couldn't shake the creeping sense of dread that had haunted him since the beginning. "Well, here we go again," Rhea muttered in resignation. "Same place, same strange feeling. Want to place any bets on finding nothing here too?" Endrick ignored him, pulling up his scanner as he began to analyze the energy signature of this third planet. He compared it to the reading head taken on the second planet, and though it was similar, there was a subtle variance, a faint difference that added another layer of mystery. "There's a slight shift in the energy signature here," he voiced while frowning. "It's not much, but it's there. We're not dealing with identical planets, just similar ones." Cersei, standing by the viewport, looked out at the landscape with a frown. "Maybe we're on the right track, then. If there's a difference, it could mean we're getting closer to something real." Endrick nodded, though he didn't let himself feel hopeful just yet. "Let's search the area, same as before. Be thorough. We're looking for any signs of the sword, or anything out of place." They disembarked, stepping into the unsettlingly familiar landscape. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the rocks and jagged formations cast long shadows across the ground. They spread out, each scanning their assigned area cautiously. Hours passed, and once again they found nothing. But just as they were preparing to regroup, Cersei's voice crackled over the comms. "Endrick, Rhea, there's someone here." Her tone was laced with strain, as if she were struggling. In the background, a loud explosion rang out, echoing across the empty landscape. "Cersei, what's your location?" Rhea asked. "Southern Ridge, just hurry." Her voice broke off as another boom echoed over the comms. Without hesitation, Endrick blinked, disappearing from his spot and reappearing at the southern ridge in an instant. He arrived just in time to see Cersei's body hurtling through the air. Her figure was illuminated by the faint teal light as she flew back disoriented. Endrick rushed forward, catching her mid-flight before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he voiced while lowering her gently. Cersei coughed, clutching her ribs as she struggled to speak. Two figures. Dark robes. They came out of nowhere. Endrick looked up, his gaze narrowing as he spotted 2 shadowed figures in dark robes, their faces obscured. The figures turned, glancing briefly at him before they started to flee, vanishing into the mist as they moved with inhuman speed. "You're not going anywhere," Endrick growled while handing Cersei off to Rhea, who had just arrived. Rhea took Cersei's arm as his casual expression got replaced with a steely look. "I'll look after Cersei." Endrick nodded as he locked onto the fleeing figures. He vanished from his spot in a blink, reappearing directly in the path of the 2 robed figures as they hurtled through the mist. He raised a hand, and a telekinetic barrier of pure energy sprang up before them, blocking their path. The 2 figures halted abruptly, and for the first time, Endrick could make out their faces, or rather, the lack thereof. Their features were hidden in shadows, as if they were wrapped in a dark veil, and their eyes glowed faintly with a sinister, otherworldly light. "What are you doing here?" Endrick demanded with a low and unyielding voice. The figures exchanged a glance, then one of them laughed. Their voice emitted a chilling hollow sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "We are here to protect what you seek, Time Candidate. One of them voiced carried on like a whisper in the wind. Endrick's eyes narrowed. Protect? So, you know about the sword. Where is it? The second figure tilted his head. It is beyond your reach, child of time. Turn back, lest you meet the fate of those who came before you. Endrick felt his patience snap. I'm afraid I can't do that. You will tell me where the sword is. He raised his hand, while silvery blue energy glowed in his eyes. I'll take the information by force, if I have to. The two figures merely smirked as their forms started to flicker like phantoms. Try if you dare, but know that your meddling here is but a pebble cast into an ocean. The ripples will drown you, time candidate. Without waiting, Endrick surged forward, reaching for the nearest figure with a swift motion. But as his hand connected, the figure's form dissolved into mist, dispersing into the air with a haunting laugh. The second figure did the same, vanishing into thin air before he could react. Left standing alone in the mist, Endrick clenched his fists. How the hell did they get away? Endrick thought he had them cornered, but he could no longer sense their presence. Whoever they were, these figures had knowledge of the sword, and the power to evade him with ease. But their words lingered in his mind. It was obvious they knew something. Endrick, Rhea's voice came over the comms. Cersis, all right. She's a bit banged up, but nothing serious. Did you get them? Chapter 1610, Karmic Temporal String. Chapter 1610. Karmic Temporal String author's note. Unedited chapter. Endrick let out a sigh while shaking his head. No, they slipped away, but they knew about the sword. They're protecting it. Or at least keeping it from us. Rhea cursed softly. So we're not just dealing with decoy planets. They're playing a bigger game here. Yeah, and we're missing the rules, Endrick muttered. Let's regroup. If they're watching us, we need to be smarter about how we move. In the dimly lit interior of their spacecraft, Cersei sat quietly in one of the rear seats with a dark and pensive expression. She replayed the encounter in her mind. The two robed figures, the explosion, the way she'd been effortlessly thrown across the air, completely outmatched. Despite her training, she couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. If she'd been stronger, maybe she could have stopped them. Maybe she wouldn't be the weak link. You okay, Cersei? Endrick broke the silence with a question as he glanced at her from the pilot's seat. Cersei forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, just frustrated. I feel like I messed things up back there. Those robed figures got away, and we're no closer to finding the sword. Maybe if I'd been faster or stronger, we could have. Endrick cut her off with a gentle but firm tone. Cersei, listen to me. This isn't on you. Those two were something else entirely. If anything, I'm amazed you stood your ground as well as you did. Even if all three of us had been there, they'd have slipped away still. They weren't ordinary enemies. Cersei looked down as her fingers fidgeted. But I don't want to be the one holding you guys back. I don't want to be the reason we fail. Rhea, leaning back in his seat with his usual casual grin, jumped in with a tone of playfulness and encouragement. Look, Cersei, you're not a weak link. You're the only one who's been smart enough to keep her head on straight this whole mission. You're doing fine. He leaned over and tapped her shoulder playfully. Come on, I know you don't want to miss out on seeing the weird wonders of the universe with us. Stick around. You might end up being the one who saves our lives, you know? Cersei managed a laugh, rolling her eyes. Fine, fine. But I still feel like I need to get stronger. I'll keep pushing myself, and am not going to stop until I'm on your level. Endrick smiled and gave her an encouraging nod. Good. But right now you need to stay focused, not locked up in your head. We're all in this together, and no one's carrying more weight than they can handle. Turning his gaze back to the monitor, Endrick studied the data from the previous scans with a look of curiosity. The two robed figures haunted his thoughts, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their appearance than just guarding the sword. They had seemed purposeful, almost protective, but there was no evidence they worked for Nocturnus. Who were they? And why did they seem so intent on keeping the sword away from them? Rhea, on the other hand, leaned back as his fingers tapped idly on his thigh. Maybe we're thinking too hard about this. This place feels off, sure, but we haven't given it a proper sweep yet. I say we go back out there, give it one more look, and see if there's anything we missed. Endrick nodded, appreciating the suggestion. You're right. We'll need to cover the area thoroughly this time. Every rock, every shadow. We search it all. Circe, you stay here and keep an eye on things in case anything happens. Rhea and I will take a closer look. Got it, Circe replied, watching them as they prepared to head out once more. She wasn't thrilled to be left behind, but she understood the need to be cautious. With a resolute expression, she gave them a nod. Stay safe out there. And if you find anything, well, let's hope it's a clue and not more trouble. Endrick and Rhea stepped out of the spacecraft, descending once again onto the strange, teal-colored landscape. The mist was thick, swirling around their feet like a living thing, and the jagged rocks cast long shadows, creating a surreal and haunting atmosphere. The entire world seemed to hold its breath, silent and watchful, as if it were aware of their presence. All right, let's split up ***, Endrick said, scanning the landscape with narrowed eyes. I'll take the east, and you take the west. Keep your comms open, and if you see anything at all, call me. Copy that, Rhea replied with a grin, giving him a mock salute. He turned and began making his way toward the western part of the ridge. As they scoured the terrain, their search seemed as fruitless as before. Endrick blinked across the area, moving swiftly and scanning every nook and cranny, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. The ground was bare, the rocks undisturbed, and there was no sign of the two robed figures who had attacked Circe. Minutes stretched into hours, and still they found nothing. Nothing here, either. Rhea's voice crackled over the comm. This place is like a bad dream. Just one empty patch after another. Endrick let out a frustrated sigh, but then an idea sparked in his mind. The figures had vanished without leaving any trace of spatial energy behind, something that should have been impossible. Even a spatial expert like E.E. would leave a signature, however faint. But what if he could bridge the gap between their temporal and spatial presence to trace them? Endrick sat on the ground in a crossed-legged format and closed his eyes to focus. He felt his time candidate power within him and channeled it. At that moment, a faint green that glowed on his forehead, an indication that Husarius, the ancient being residing within him, was ready to assist. Husarius, are you there? I have an idea, but I'm going to need your guidance. The deep, rumbling voice of Husarius echoed in his mind. I am here, Cedric. Speak your plan, and let us see if it is worthy of pursuit. Endrick took a deep breath, explaining, I want to use a form of temporal rewind, but not on myself. I want to trace their last presence on this world and bind it with my ambience of space and will. I think if I combine these powers, I could create a tether to their past location. Husarius considered the idea and spoke with a calm, yet contemplative tone. A risky endeavor, but one that could bear fruit. Focus on their essence, the faint trace of their existence that still lingers in this space. Let your powers intertwine and reach back through the threads of time. Endrick closed his eyes as his brows furrowed in concentration. He extended his time candidate power, letting it merge with the ambience of space around him, feeling the energy coil and pulse through the surroundings. His time candidate abilities began to reach back, combing through the invisible layers of temporal echoes, seeking a trace of the robed figures. The process was slow and delicate. He held his breath as the combined powers danced, weaving together in a fragile balance. And then, Finally, something shifted. A faint glow materialized before him, forming a thin, shimmering string that stretched from the ground where the robed figures had last stood, reaching up into the sky, extending deep into the vast reaches of space. Opening his eyes, Endrick saw the ethereal string, a thin line visible only to him, extending far beyond the planet. "There it is," he murmured with a sense of awe. "A link, a thread of their presence. We can follow it." "I is seeing this. Rhea?" Endrick questioned. "Seeing what?" Rhea asked back with a look of confusion. Endrick could already tell that it was invisible to everyone else based on Rhea's reaction, but he still answered. "The thread. I guess you can't see it." Rhea appeared by Endrick's side, gazing in the direction of the shimmering string, but he still couldn't see anything. "They'll take your word for it, Endrick, but to me, you're just standing there pointing at thin air." Endrick rolled his eyes, gesturing toward the ship. "It's a trace of their past presence. Get to the ship. We're following this thread. If we're lucky, Itiello, lead us right to wherever they went." Back inside the ship, Cersei met them at the controls with a look of excitement. "Did you really manage to create a link to them? That's incredible. UNC. That's Endrick to you. And yes, Itiel, lead us somewhere. Though I can't say for certain where. But if those figures left this trace, they can't be far from whatever they're protecting. Let's hope it's the sword." Endrick responded with a look of slight reassurance. As he set the course to follow the shimmering thread into the stars, the spacecraft buzzed smoothly. A quiet resolve settled over each of them as they prepared to chase down the mysterious figures once and for all. "Here we go," Rhea voiced while bracing himself in his seat as the ship surged forward, following ghost trails across the galaxy. "Just a typical day, right?" "Exactly," Cersei said with a laugh while her eyes were glued to the screen. Chapter 1611, Taking a Toll. Chapter 1611, Taking a Toll. Author's note. Unedited chapter, following ghost trails across the galaxy. Just a typical day, right? Rhea chimed with a look of unseriousness. "Exactly," Cersei said with a laugh while her eyes were glued to the screen. Endrick remained focused, guiding the ship as they pursued the faint thread. The path led them far from the teal planet, through dense stretches of space where stars gleamed like distant beacons against the dark. In the vast reaches of interstellar space, Gustav's spacecraft was a solitary speck, a tiny vessel threading through the cosmos on its way to the next vestige of his outworldly power. This vestige was far more distant than the previous ones, requiring over a week of travel at top speed. Gustav knew he could attempt to cover the distance faster using his void-piercing boots, but these boots were better suited for pinpoint travel, navigating known locations. This was why it was easier for him to get Endrick and the others back to Earth. In unfamiliar regions, he risked overshooting his destination, ending up several galaxies off course. For now, he was content to let the spacecraft guide him. After all, he couldn't complete the ritual until Endrick and the others located the sword. Gathering the vestiges was only part of his journey. His full power remained locked until all the pieces came together. With the spacecraft on autopilot, Gustav moved to a quiet spot along the corridor, away from the control deck's dim glow. He settled down on the cool metal floor, folding his legs into a meditative stance. He hadn't channeled his bloodline in a while, and as he began to focus, a familiar warmth stirred within him. His thoughts drifted as he relaxed, memories surfacing. Aslav, his old friend, the last of an era, had watched him disappear into his journey with a promise that someday he'd return. "Rest in peace, old friend," Gustav murmured with a soft tone in the stillness of the ship. "Endrick's your blood, and hell definitely pass on the legacy." With that, Gustav took a deep breath, channeling his bloodline. His energy began to ripple through him, vibrant and fierce, a potent force that he hadn't fully explored since his return. He could feel that he was hovering at the peak of the fourth step of beta rank, only a small push away from alpha, but he hesitated. The first ascension to alpha rank triggered a powerful phenomenon, a surge of energy so intense that it would overwhelm and likely destroy his surroundings. While he wasn't sentimental about the spacecraft, he wasn't exactly keen on drifting in the void either. For now, it would be best to hold back. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, the system materialized before him, dressed in a vibrant red gown. Its girl-like appearance smirked at him, and her eyes glinted with playful mischief. "You're getting rusty, Gustav," she teased, swirling her gown as she moved in a circle around him. "Sitting on your power like a miser with his gold. What, afraid you'll blow the ship apart? Or just afraid?" Gustav rolled his eyes. "And here I thought I might get a moment's peace. Guess I forgot I'm stuck with a talkative piece of code." "Talkative? Me?" The system feigned offense, placing a hand on her chest in exaggerated surprise. "You wound me. After all, in the one guiding you on this grand journey." "Guiding?" Gustav chuckled, raising an eyebrow. "If I remember correctly, you've spent just as much time being absent as you have guiding me. Remind me again how long you've been gone, or is that one of the many great mysteries?" "Perhaps it is," the system chuckled lightly. "Tell me, how is it that amongst everything Dimension 6 revealed to me, your origin wasn't included? The revelation of my outworldly identity and the existence of deities were all revealed, and yet there was not a single hint as to how you, a computerized being capable of giving me the power to increase levels, came into existence," Gustav voiced with a look of curiosity. The system's teasing expression softened slightly, her eyes shifting to a distant look. "Dimension 6, that was. I spent thousands of years drifting through space, searching for the right host. I saw countless worlds, countless lives, until I finally found Earth and you." "Thousands of years? Huh?" Gustav leaned back with a curious glint in his eyes. "And you never thought to give me a straightforward answer about where you came from? You know, most people just tell their story from the start, not in bits and riddles." The system laughed, twirling again. "Well, where's the fun in that? And besides, it's not that simple. My origin isn't tied to deities or celestials, nor does it come from any cosmic entity. My existence is unique, let's say. But don't worry, soon enough, you'll understand everything." "Soon enough? Huh?" Gustav's gaze narrowed. "Convenient answer. I've spent years unraveling mysteries, but yours still elude me. You show up when you want, disappear when you want, and have this uncanny ability to know things that people shouldn't. You're not exactly an open book." The system shrugged, looking him directly in the eyes. "I'm as much of a mystery to you as you are to yourself, Gustav. You've learned about your past, yes, but there's still much you don't know about your own power. You think you understand the outworldly, but there's more to it. I'm here to guide you through that understanding. And when the time is right, you'll know my full purpose too." Gustav's expression hardened slightly. "So, what am I supposed to do until then? Just trust that everything will magically make sense?" "Oh, no. Trust is a luxury, and you've never been one for it. But you're not here by chance, and neither am I. Just keep moving forward. Keep gathering the vestiges, find your sword, and you'll have all the answers you're looking for." With that, she began to fade, her red gown becoming translucent as she vanished into the air, leaving Gustav alone once more. He sighed, running a hand through his hair as he stared into the dim lighting of the corridor. The next day, Gustav returned to the cockpit, his gaze fixed on the endless stretch of stars through the viewport. As he sat, memories continued to surface, weaving through his mind as he pondered the journey ahead. The space outside was dark, but the distant glow of stars painted the void with points of light. Approaching waypoint in 5 days, the ship's AI chimed, interrupting his thoughts. Acknowledged, Gustav replied, absent-mindedly watching as the stars drifted past. He leaned back in his seat, allowing himself a rare moment of quiet as he felt the spacecraft buzz around him. Hours passed as he journeyed deeper into the void, and his mind continued to dwell on his friends, wondering how Endrik and the others were faring. They were scouring distant worlds for the sword despite the obstacles they'd already faced. He hoped they were making progress. Time wasn't on their side. The cold silence of space stretched endlessly around their ship. The darkness was broken only by the pinpricks of distant stars. Endrik, Rhea, and Circe had been following the faint, nearly invisible karmic temporal string for days, tracing its path relentlessly. They hoped it would lead them to the sword Gustav needed, but the journey was starting to take its toll, especially on Endrik. His eyes were fixed on the glowing thread, visible only to him, that stretched out ahead like a faintly pulsating beacon. Each beat took a little more of his energy, draining him with the effort required to maintain the tenuous link. For nearly a week, they had journeyed like this, trusting in the thread to guide them to a place that seemed infinitely far away. "Are we there yet?" Rhea asked while leaning back in his seat with a dramatic sigh. Endrik shook his head in frustration. "No, not yet. And asking every 5 minutes isn't going to get us there any faster, Rhea." Rhea shrugged, unfazed. "Hey, I'm just saying, following an invisible thread into nowhere, not exactly the sightseeing tour I signed up for." Circe shot Rhea a glare, placing a hand on Endrik's shoulder in reassurance. "Don't listen to him, Uncle. You're doing amazing. Just keep your focus. We're right here with you." Endrik's face dropped even more from hearing this. Her consolation was doing more harm than good. "That's Endrik to you," he bellowed. His skin had paled from exhaustion, and his eyes held a flicker of weariness that he was trying hard to mask. They had been pushing through space without rest, and it was starting to show. Another day of non-stop flying past, and Endrik's energy reserves were reaching their limit. His vision started to blur, and the faint thread was beginning to flicker, as if it were about to vanish entirely. "Endrik!" Circe's voice was laced with concern as she noticed his hands trembling slightly. Chapter 16:12, Stranded. Chapter 16:12. Stranded author's note. Unedited chapter. Endrik gritted his teeth as he struggled to hold on. I don't know if I can keep this up. The string, it's starting to disappear. I need to stay awake, but Rhea frowned, noticing Endrik's condition worsening. "You're running on fumes, man. If you keep pushing like this, you're going to pass out. Maybe we should stop." Before he could finish, a green that flashed on Endrik's forehead as Husarius' deep voice echoed in Endrik's mind. "If you fall unconscious, the thread will dissipate entirely." Endrik nodded weakly, though his body was already betraying him. He fought to keep his eyes open, but his strength was fading fast. With a final shudder, he lost his grip on the string, and his vision went dark as he slumped back in his seat, passing out from pure exhaustion. "Endrik!" Circe gasped, rushing over to him as his body went limp. "Damn it, he's out cold," Rhea muttered, moving to help her lift Endrik and lay him back against the seat. "Guess we're on pause until he wakes up." They settled Endrik as comfortably as they could, securing him in place. Circe's face was drawn with worry as she glanced at Rhea. "He pushed himself too far," she whispered, brushing a stray hair from Endrik's forehead. "He's been carrying this entire journey on his shoulders. I wish I could have done more to help." Rhea placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hey, don't beat yourself up. We all did what we could, and now we let him rest. He'll bounce back soon." With Endrik now asleep, they set about gathering some food and supplies, preparing for when he finally woke up. It was nearly a day before he stirred. His eyes fluttered open to see the concerned faces of Circe and Rhea hovering over him. "No!" he exclaimed, trying to sit up. He looked around wildly in search of the thread, but it was gone. The faint glow head held onto for so long had vanished completely. "Endrick, calm down," Cersei said gently while placing a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "You're okay. You were exhausted. We had to let you rest." Endrick's face fell in frustration. "But the thread, it's gone. We're stranded here in the middle of nowhere, and we've lost our only lead." Rhea gave him a crooked smile. "Hey, look on the bright side. At least you didn't completely collapse on top of the control panel and send us spinning into an asteroid field. Small mercies, right?" Endrick's scowl softened, tightened, and defeated. "I thought I could hold on just a little longer. Now we're stuck, and it's my fault." "No, don't even go there," Cersei said firmly, grabbing his hand and squeezing it reassuringly. "You got us this far, didn't you? Well, figure something out. But first you need to eat. Your energy's still low, and starving yourself won't bring the thread back." She handed him a piece of dried fruit, which he took reluctantly, biting into it without enthusiasm. "It feels like all that effort was for nothing," he mumbled between bites. "We've been flying blind in space for days, and now we have no clue where to go next." Rhea leaned back, crossing his arms as he gave Endrick a thoughtful look. "Maybe, maybe not. I mean, come on. These things don't just disappear completely, do they? There's got to be a way to track it again. You created that link once. Maybe there's some other way to pick up the trail." Endrick sighed as his gaze fell to the floor. "It's not that simple. The thread was fragile, a temporary connection. Once it's gone, it's gone. I don't know if I can recreate it without that initial spark signature from the previous location." The dim glow of the spacecraft's control panels illuminated the worried expressions of Endrick, Cersei, and Rhea as they floated in the vast emptiness of deep space. For days, they had followed the karmic temporal string, guided by Endrick's abilities. But now, without that faint line stretching ahead, they were truly directionless. Endrick sighed, leaning back in his seat with a look of uncertainty. Cersei broke the silence after a while. "Maybe we should just head to the fourth location. It's the last place on our list. Maybe that's where we'll find something." Endrick shook his head. "I don't think ITLL helped. We've checked 3 places already, and all we found were dead ends. If we go there, and it's the same, ITLL be a waste of time and energy." Cersei's shoulders slumped, disappointment showing in her face. "So what, then? Just sit here in the middle of nowhere?" Rhea leaned back with his usual casual grin, though his eyes held a glimmer of sincerity. "Or we could just keep going forward, right? Follow the path the string pointed in before it disappeared. Who knows? Maybe we're closer than we think." Endrick arched a brow, giving Rhea a sideways look. "You're suggesting we fly into empty space with no destination in sight." Rhea shrugged. "Why not? We're already in the middle of nowhere. We can either turn back, waste time, or just go with it and see what happens. Worst case, we're still lost. Best case, we find what we're looking for." Endrick rubbed his temples, thinking it over. "It's risky, but maybe you're right. We've got nothing to lose at this point." Cersei nodded with a small spark of determination in her eyes. "If there's even a chance ITLL lead us somewhere, I say we take it. We've come too far to turn back." Endrick exhaled, feeling a small sense of relief in their decision. "All right, Rhea, you take the controls. I'll need to conserve my energy in case we run into any trouble." Rhea grinned, sliding into the pilot's seat and cracking his knuckles dramatically. "Leave it to me. I'll steer us straight through the void without a hitch." "That's what I'm afraid of," Endrick muttered, but he allowed himself a faint smile. He directed Rhea to steer toward the last point he'd seen the thread, then leaned back in his seat to rest. The days that followed were monotonous and unyielding. The stars outside drifted past as the spacecraft cut through space at a steady pace, but every hour that passed without finding a trace of life or any sign that they were heading in the right direction chipped away at their patience. Rhea, despite his outward cheer, began to feel the uncertain, and even Cersei's optimism wavered. "Endrick, how are you holding up?" Cersei asked one day, as they sat in the cockpit together. Endrick looked up with weary eyes. "I'm fine, just frustrated. It's like we're floating in a void, hoping for something to appear out of nowhere. I know it wasn't my idea to follow the direction, but it's starting to feel like a mistake." "We made the best choice we could with the information we had," Cersei said reassuringly. "Besides, if we give up now, we'll never know how close we might have been." Rhea swung his chair around with a look of encouragement. "Let's not stop here. We don't know how close we are. Let's hope you're right." Meanwhile, in a distant part of the universe, Gustav was nearing his next vestige, navigating through a dense region of space filled with cosmic debris and small asteroid fields. The faint, pulsing energy of the vestige drew him forward, and he could feel its power growing stronger with each passing hour. He knew he was close, but something in the surrounding space felt different, off. As he closed in, a low groan echoed through his spacecraft, and a red warning light flashed on the dashboard. Gustav raised a brow, leaning forward to study the message that appeared on the screen. "Frowny face, restricted space. Living matter will be affected. Great, just what I needed," Gustav muttered, tapping the screen. "And I suppose living matter includes me." He brought the ship to a halt, staring out into the dark void ahead. The area beyond seemed calm, almost eerily still, as if held in place by some invisible force. But he could sense the vestige on the other side, faint but distinct, calling to him. Just then, the system manifested before him in its familiar girl-like form, dressed in a crimson gown with a mischievous grin. "Trouble," she taunted, gliding closer. "You could say that," Gustav replied dryly. "I need to get past this point to reach the vestige, but apparently it's a zone where living tissue is affected. Any ideas?" The system tilted her head thoughtfully. "Oh, surely a big, bad outworldly like you can figure this out. Or maybe the answer is closer than you think." Gustav's brow furrowed. "I don't have time for riddles, system. You either speak or keep shut. I can take care of it myself." The system laughed, circling him like a specter. "What you need is a workaround. What is it about this restriction that's keeping you out? Is it your body, your energy, or something else?" That you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.